Yasmeen is not only a friend, a dear friend, and a colleague on the board of the New Israel Fund. Where are you? Although decades my junior, you're my hero. Those who know me, especially my students, may be surprised by this claim because I can be somewhat parsimonious in doling out praise. But this is the key point, and please listen carefully. Yasmeen is a once-in-a-generation transformational leader. She possesses a remarkable array of talents and qualities: bottomless compassion, wicked intelligence, a charisma driven by her deep modesty, and a preternatural savoir-faire, which is a fancy way of saying that she knows how to get things done, like nobody's business. If the future of NIF and Israeli society rests in the hands of Yasmeen and those like her, though there really is no one like her, there is a good reason to believe that the arc of history will bend toward justice. Let me tell you a little bit more about Yasmeen. She's a Bedouin Palestinian citizen of Israel and a medical doctor with a specialty in internal medicine. She is currently completing a clinical fellowship in critical care at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, and also serving as a fellow at the Middle East Initiative at the Kennedy School at Harvard, from which she received a master's in public administration. She formerly served as the health policy director at the Task Force for Health Promotion and Equity in Arab Society at the Israeli Ministry of Health. She's won numerous awards for her work, including the 2007 Ramon Award for Quality, Leadership, and Excellence, and she was chosen to be a part of Forbes' 30 Under 30 list. I should add that Yasmeen was a first responder at Soroka Hospital in Beersheba, treating the first victims of the October 7th attacks, as many of us read in the New York Times. Perhaps more importantly, Yasmeen is a boundary crosser, a bridge builder, and a path breaker, the living embodiment of what a truly equitable shared society in Israel can look like. She also possesses what is in such short supply today: hope. Hope that tomorrow can be better than today, and not just for Jews, but for Arab and Jewish children, the coming generations, who, God willing, will one day say, basta, or in the spirit of our season, dayenu, enough of this mad violence in our beautiful and broken land. What all this means is that it is my immense pleasure and honor to introduce to you Dr. Yasmeen Abu Fraiha.
Wow, I think I can go home now. There's no need to hear. Wow, good afternoon, everyone. Erev Tov, Masa el Khair al-Jami'. Thank you so much for coming here to this amazing evening, to this special and very moving event. I feel so honored and privileged to speak to you today, and thankful for the opportunity to tell you my story, especially after the events of the last 24 hours. On October 7th, I woke up at 6:29 a.m. to the sound of sirens. The first thought that came to my mind that morning was, I can't believe this is happening again. I rolled my eyes and started to get ready to go to the hospital. I was on call that day, and I already knew that I will be needed in Soroka. You see, there is a military operation in Gaza at least once a year. And every staff member in Soroka already knows the drill. We know what departments have no shelters and need to be evacuated, and we know where to evacuate them to. We know what services to shut down and what services to keep. Everyone knows their job in this situation. Only weeks later, it had dawned to me how crazy it is that we are actually used to it. We shrug our shoulders whenever this is happening, and it takes something truly catastrophic for us to lose our indifference. I arrived at the hospital at 7 a.m., ready to receive patients from the geriatric department, which is not sheltered. I still had no clue of what was happening. I was trying to discharge a patient with a minor stroke and told her, I deeply apologize. Normally I would have kept you here for rehab, but given the current security issue, I really can't do that. She looked at me with this baffled stare and said, I don't think I can reach my house. All the roads are blocked. Are you really not aware of what is happening? And she was the first one to tell me about the gunmen and terrorists in the streets of the Gaza envelope, shooting anyone they see. At first, I really thought she was hallucinating. Maybe it was part of her stroke. But then the orderlies started to come. They walked in with the geriatric patients, and their faces were grim. One of them told me, you should really see what is going on in the ER. People are coming with their limbs in bags. It is unbelievable. And then I knew that I had to go help in the ER. I've been working at Soroka Hospital in Beersheba for 7 years and spent hundreds of hours in its emergency department. I've worked there all through COVID and during natural disasters like the flood in Nachal Tzafit, which took the lives of 10 teenagers. This is by far the busiest emergency department in Israel, but I have never seen anything even remotely close to what I've seen there on October 7th. Hundreds and hundreds of patients, an endless sea of people coming in the doors, crying, shouting, looking for their families. I've treated soldiers who were wounded in battle, women who ran away from their homes in Ofakim, Sderot, Netivot, foreign workers from Thailand who were working in the fields that morning and saw their friends burn alive. Young Israelis and tourists who managed to run away from the massacre at the Nova Music Festival. Bedouins who came with the bodies of their children who were directly hit by Hamas rockets just because they do not have a shelter to run to. I've spent 12 long hours in the ER that day. At a certain point in the afternoon, before I approached yet another patient with severe injuries who came in after waiting for 7 hours to be rescued, I looked at this chaotic space that has been my home in the past few years and saw the amazing teams who came to help. Secular and religious Jews, Bedouins and settlers, students came to volunteer, and even senior doctors who left the hospital years ago. Everyone was there, and we were there together. This was our reserve duty. And this is when it hit me. The real divide here is not between Arabs and Jews or between Palestinians and Israelis. The actual divide is between those who believe that violence is the answer to this conflict and that it is a legitimate means to achieve safety and security, and those who believe in saving lives, in humanity, in empathy and compassion. The divide is between those who believe it is okay to kill people for a higher purpose and those who believe that every human life is sacred. If there is one thing that we should learn from the attacks of last night, is that violence leads to more violence, while peace and allyship, like what we have with Jordan, actually leads to safety and prosperity. And this is where NIF comes in. Thank you. And this is where NIF comes in. I have joined NIF roughly 3 years ago, but I've known the organization years before. I've always appreciated the cause, the mission, and the values of NIF, and especially the ability to stand strong and proud even when dealing with the most malicious attacks. But I have to tell you that I have never been more proud to be a part of NIF than I am since October 7th. NIF has chosen decades ago to be on the side of humanity. And when it came to the test of the horrors of October 7th, we kept sticking to our values. Since the Israeli government was totally absent, the NIF has funded emergency grants for shelters in the Bedouin unrecognized villages, hotel rooms for evacuees from the kibbutzim and the cities in the Gaza envelope, clinics for these evacuees in the Dead Sea, run by our grantee, Physicians for Human Rights, headquarters to identify the hostages and advocate for their return. And that was never at the expense of NIF's constant work against the occupation, the displacement, and the violence against Palestinians in both the West Bank and Gaza. NIF has shown in this dark hour in history that its moral compass is strong and unbreakable, leading it in the right direction. I specifically remember one incident when I got a text message from someone who volunteered to help Fake Reporter, one of our grantees and an amazing organization that works to fight the spread of fake news and disinformation. And this volunteer said that their staff is experiencing devastating mental health issues from watching the horrific videos of the war. I wrote to Mickey, and in absolutely no time, we have found the funds to get these incredible workers the professional help that they needed. This is NIF. This is who we are. And this is all thanks to the amazing NIF staff who are working days and nights to help everyone in need. Especially and specifically, I want to mention the teams in Israel-Palestine, as they have been dealing with extremely difficult times. Some of them being called traitors by their surroundings. Some of them are Palestinians who have families in Gaza. Some of them have friends and family among the hostages. And many of them have lost someone dear to their hearts. But they kept on going, fighting the fight for equality, dignity, and freedom, continuing in an absolutely admirable way to push NIF's mission forward. So please join me in thanking them now. This is really cool. But I can't talk about October 7th without talking about the disaster that is happening in Gaza now. The word disaster doesn't even begin to explain the catastrophe. By now, over 33,000 Gazans were killed. More than 13,000 of them are children. This is almost 1.5% of Gaza's population before the war. In American numbers, we would be talking about over 4.7 million people dead. My true fear now is that the new escalation in the region will actually make us forget the suffering in Gaza. But not only are Gazans killed by bombs on their houses, but they are being shot at while going out to look for food. Hundreds were massacred when they approached the few aid trucks that were allowed in. They can't even seek for medical help, as the healthcare system is being attacked constantly and is practically not functional anymore. Every Palestinian I've talked to by now has lost, on average, about 30 family members. Children arrive to medical tents and receive the acronym, kind of diagnosis, WCNSF. Wounded child, no surviving family. And the worst part about this is that this is a man-made catastrophe. And it has become extremely radical to call for a ceasefire. How did we get to this point that simply asking to stop the violence is perceived as extreme? But we in NIF can't stay silent. I can tell you that I personally can't sleep at night knowing that my tax money is funding this mass killing and famine. But I will not have it, not in my name. And fortunately, I am not alone. NIF's team and board has built and approved a fundraising campaign, as Danielle mentioned earlier today, to support World Central Kitchen and International Rescue Committee to continue supplying food to Palestinians in Gaza. To me, this speaks yet again to the strong core values of NIF that are not forgotten even in the darkest of hours, and I am so proud of NIF for taking this incredibly necessary action. Finally, I want to tell you one final story that gives me some hope. During Ramadan that just ended, I was invited to an iftar dinner at the hospital I'm working in. Attendees were Muslims from all around the world, and many of them were Palestinian diaspora. You may actually relate to this. These are people who were born outside of their homeland because their ancestors were refugees of a terrible war back in the 40s. Many of them, even if they had never set foot in the Holy Land, still feel deep connection to this place. They have family members there, heritage stories that they keep telling from one generation to the next, and they never forget to mention Jerusalem. The conversation during the iftar was all about the Israel-Gaza war. People expressed their fears for their families, shared their stories of Islamophobic incidents since October 7th, and how depressed they were from the situation. For them, there's a life before October 7th, and there's a life after it. A day later, lo and behold, I was spontaneously invited to a Shabbat dinner by some Israeli friends. Guess what we talked about? It was the exact same conversation, and I only felt sorry that these dinners were not merged together. We are all one. We fear the same things. We feel the same things. We go through such similar experiences, and we all feel so much connected to this tiny but magnificent piece of land. But we rarely talk to each other because we think that the others, they won't understand us. So we should always keep that in mind and try to show empathy, compassion, and acknowledgement for the pain of each other. And speaking of special dinners, in a week from now, the Jewish world will celebrate Pesach, Passover, the holiday of freedom and liberty. You, or at least some of you, will sit at the Seder table and read from the Haggadah as part of mitzvat V'higadet levincha. V'higadet levincha bayom ההוא לאמור, בעבור זה עשה אדוני לי בצאתי ממצרים. זכור את היום הזה אשר יצאתם ממצרים, מבית עבדים, כי בחוזק יד הוציא אדוני אתכם מזה. You shall tell your son on that day, it is because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. Remember this day in which you came out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, for by a strong hand the Lord brought you out from this place. This is the night when every Jewish family is obliged to tell their sons and daughters about the exodus of the Hebrew men, to tell the story of how they have turned from slaves to free men and women. I encourage you on that night, in a week from now, when you all sit at the Seder table and talk about freedom and the pursuit of happiness, to not forget those who are still not free. I encourage you to tell your sons and daughters about the Israeli hostages, men, women, and children who were brutally kidnapped from their houses, now held in Gaza for over 6 months, away from home, away from safety, away from freedom. And at this Seder table, when you talk about liberty, please remember to also talk about the Palestinian people, the ones who have not been free for more than 75 years, living under cruel occupation without the freedom to speak their minds, without the freedom to travel and move wherever they want, without the freedom to choose what to do for a living, without the freedom to protect themselves, and even without the freedom to simply seek for food. Do not forget the people of Gaza, those who have nowhere to go, no shelters to hide in, almost no hospitals to go to, no clean water, no food or medications, and no country or government that is responsible for them. And please remember Amina al-Hassoni, the 7-year-old Bedouin girl who was severely injured yesterday by Iranian missiles. And while she is fighting for her life, her family needs to fight a demolition order sent by the Israeli government to demolish their house. There is a saying in Mishnah Pesachim regarding this mitzvah. בכל דור ודור חייב אדם לראות את עצמו כאילו הוא יצא ממצרים. In every generation, a man is obligated to regard himself as though he personally had gone forth from Egypt. This is usually said as a way to remember to thank the Lord for his greatness, for he has brought the Hebrew people from slavery into freedom, from sorrow into joy, from mourning into festivity, from darkness into great light, and from servitude into redemption. But I choose to look at this phrase differently, as an obligation to never forget what it means to be a slave, what it means to not be free. In every generation, all of us must always feel to the bottom of our hearts what it means not to be free, and do whatever we can so that everyone will be free. And I see parallels to it in one of the best poems by Mahmoud Darwish, the national Palestinian poet. It's called Think of Others. As you prepare your breakfast, think of others. Do not forget the pigeon's food. As you wage your wars, think of others. Do not forget those who seek peace. As you pay your water bill, think of others, those who are nursed by clouds. As you return home to your home, think of others. Do not forget the people of the camps. As you sleep and count the stars, think of others, those who have nowhere to sleep. As you liberate yourself with metaphors, think of others, those who have lost their right to speak. And as you think of others far away, think of yourself and say, if only I were a candle in the dark. وأنت تفكر بالآخرين البعيدين فكر بنفسك قل ليتني شمعة في الظلام. In these extremely dark times, we must all be a candle in the dark. Thank you.